Thank you, Lewis. See, that's Lewis's TV experience, because Lewis and John have been doing a bit of recording for the institution. I think it's all under wraps at the moment, so I won't spill the beans, ruin the excitement. But yes, so we've got John Butler here tonight, and I'm very pleased to introduce John. And I checked in with him earlier in the week to find out. I said, so you've got 50 years of experience as a mechanical engineer, and John was very quick to correct me and say that he's actually got 60 years. So I think that has led him to be the itinerant engineer, with lots of stories to tell, lots of experience to share. And the Birmingham Area Committee are really pleased that John's offered to share some insights and some of his experiences, some of his knowledge, and this being the first of a series of talks that John is going to put on for us. The first of which is all around John's experiences in China. So I'm not going to drag out the introduction any longer than it needs to be, because John's got a lot of interesting stuff to talk to us about tonight. So without further ado, I shall hand over to yourself, John Butler.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Lewis, for all the organisation for this. A little over 20 years ago, I wrote a book called Engineering is Fun. Principally, it was looking at my experiences in engineering, but from a light-hearted point of view. I still believe that engineering can be fun. I know that we push and we say engineering is a great career and it's rewarding and everything else, but we don't push enough the fact that it's an enjoyable experience, or can be, and I hope it is, because when people are doing a job, if they enjoy it, then it makes it all that much better. And it's something that I think we as engineers need to get across to young people, that engineering is a good, enjoyable career to have, which is really why I like working with sort of fellow members of the institution, people like Bob Shanks with his Imagineering experience, and also Caroline Alliston with Technology for Fun, which, if you've not seen it, she's done some books on there, and they are great for encouraging young people into engineering. But I'll divert a little bit. We're going to be talking, or I'm going to be talking tonight about an experience I had, a visit to China in 1980. But before that, the series of talks is entitled The Itinerant Engineer. So I think I'd like to go back a little bit and explain why I've got that title. Why. Up to the age of about 28, I'd never actually been abroad. I didn't even have a passport. But I was working for the first 37 years of my career. I worked for a group of companies. They had 3 different owners during that time, but for the major part of it, it was the GKN group of companies. In the early 1970s, our company, which used to make axles, Salisbury Transmission, had a new managing director. And he came in and decided that things should change a little bit. Within GKN, there were 2 axle companies, and within the UK, there were probably another 1 or 2 axle companies of any significance. And he had the idea that if GKN were to buy one of these other axle companies, then having 3 together would be able to form a division within GKN, because GKN had divisions and within divisions of the companies. So he put forward to the board of GKN this proposal that we had an axles division, and they accepted it. And of course, he then became chairman of the axles division. Quite a smart move on his part. One of the first things he did was to bring in a new sales and marketing director for the axles division. He came in with a bit of a reputation, I must say. He was known as a dynamic, no-nonsense, kick the door down, go-getter sort of person. So pretty dynamic one. At the time, I was assistant chief engineer. I was running a department of about 25 to 30 designers and engineers. And it was my habit to work over for about an hour or so after everyone had gone home, trying to tidy up the work of the day and sort out the following day's program. And one evening I was sitting there and my phone went about 5:45. And I answered it, and it was my director. And he said, "Oh, I'm glad you're still there. Can I go up and see this divisional sales and marketing director?" I said, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll go up and see him." So I went up to the heavily carpeted corridor along to the offices of the divisional directors. And on the way along, I saw one of my colleagues, David, coming the other way. Now, I don't know if any of you remember a strip cartoon in the Daily Express called The Gambols. But in that cartoon, the main character frequently had problems and always in a bad mood. And when he was in that bad mood, he was depicted with a black cloud over his head, often with rain coming down. Sunny everywhere else, but just over him, it was a black cloud. And I'm quite convinced when David approached me, I could see this black cloud over his head. So I said, "Good evening, David." And he sort of grunted as he walked past, and I thought, "Oh, okay, fair enough." So I went in to see the sales marketing director. He said, "Oh, right." He said, "We are going to expand our sales, and we think we'd like you to have a look after it." And I quite naively said, "Isn't that what David does?" And he said, "Well, he was till 5 minutes ago." So I suddenly realised why David had this rather black cloud over his head. I said, He said, "Well, we're not looking for just sales. What we're trying to do is expand the business by going for joint ventures, license agreements, company acquisitions, a whole host of areas that are not just sales. And we're looking for someone who can represent the three companies in division, both from the engineering point of view and from the commercial point of view." I thought, "Oh, wow, okay. Thank you very much. Can I think about that?" He said, "Yeah, of course." He said, "When you come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, let me know your answer." "Fine, thank you very much." So that night I had a long discussion with my wife, and we thought about it, and I decided that my boss, the chief engineer, and his boss, the director, they both had about another 10 years or so before they retired, and they weren't going to move anywhere. So maybe this was one opportunity to move on in the career I was doing. So I agreed, and I changed over from pure engineering to an engineering and marketing role, and spent the next, the whole life of my career then traveling. And I've now traveled and worked in 22 different countries, which was quite an experience. So moving on there to 1980, it's a time when China was just coming out of its post-Mao era, and it was going into economic reform, and it was opening up to the rest of the world, and it was looking to expand and see how they could improve by doing ventures with mainly Western companies. Now, GKN was the first major European automotive manufacturer to be approached by the Chinese government and asked to go over and do a presentation and see how they could assist the Chinese automotive business to move forward. And they were proposing that we sent a team over for an extended visit and saw how we could improve their automotive business. So GKN set up a team. I was representing the axles division. We also had people from the forgings division, transmissions division, Sankey division and 2 from the contractors division. And the team was going to be led by Roger, who was a main board director. Now, Roger was a bit of an exceptional person. He was a true gentleman. He was, I'm convinced he was a member of the aristocracy. He was an excellent and caring leader. And the trip was going to be from the end of August through to the end of September, 4 weeks in China. We started planning the meeting in April, well in advance. And one of the main things we had to do was presentations, because it was going to be centered around a series of presentations. So we wrote them, we rewrote them, we practiced them, we got together, we looked at each other's, and then when we were happy with them, I had to present my presentation to my company's board, which they accepted. And then ultimately we all had to go down to London and present it to the chairman of GKN and some of the GKN board and get their sign-in. In the end, they were happy with the presentations. We also had to do a lot of other preparation for things like injections and visas and a whole host of things. I think it was a bit like a pincushion at one stage because I had smallpox, cholera, polio. Pre-computer day, so we're looking at having to take over a whole host of catalogues, brochures, equipment, projectors, slides, overheads. And when we worked it out, we actually had a half a ton of luggage that we were going to have to transport over to China. We weren't going to carry it. We sent half of it over to Hong Kong to pick up there, and then the other half went to Peking, as it was then, Beijing now, where we'd pick up halfway through the trip. The other thing was, it was decided that to make things a bit easier, I would also become a banker. For all the joint presentations and the joint events that we did, I would be making all the payments and then sorting out from everybody's own individual budgets, getting the money back. So I had to keep control of all the expenses that went through. Then shortly before we went, sometime about July or August, early August time, we received the itinerary from the Chinese government. And when it came, we noticed that for the 4 weeks we were there, we were either working or traveling every single day except one. We thought, oh, that's pretty good. I'm going to enjoy that. In fact, in the end, we visited 6 centres. We gave presentations. We saw 16 companies with 92 different senior personnel. We gave 10 presentations with an audience of 400 and attended a major exhibition. So it was going to be quite an experience. So the day came when we flew to Hong Kong, we rested overnight, and then we went to collect all the goods we'd sent over to Hong Kong ready for onward travel. So when we got to the building where all our goods were gathered, we saw a whole host of bags like that, which became our jolly bags. There were something between 40 and 50 of them that we had to carry around Hong Kong. So between sort of 7 or 8 of us, that was quite an occasion. So anyway, we got going. We had our first, we had a train journey over into Guangzhou and stayed at a very nice hotel in Guangzhou. And we went down for dinner on the first evening. and that was more like a palatial meeting hall than a dining room. It was really excellent, but massive. One of our team there, when we started dinner, he took out from his pocket a knife and fork. And we thought, no, there's no way you're going to do that. You're going to have to use chopsticks like the rest of us. So we shamed him into using chopsticks. Anyway, we had a decent meal. And our man in Hong Kong who was with us at the end of the meal, he said to me, he says, see the lady over there in the corner? I said, oh, yes. He said, can you go over there and say to her, Binky Lin? Well, I'm off for a challenge, so I thought, okay, I'll try that. So I wandered over. I smiled rather hesitantly. Now I said, Binky Lin? And she smiled, turned around, opened a cabinet and gave me an ice cream. Now I thought, oh, great. So I proudly went back, and I was the only one at the table to have an ice cream. Everyone else didn't get one. It turned out that the party were a little bit hesitant about the food. And we found out that everybody had brought blocks of Cadbury's chocolate with them. All except, that is, for Roger, our team leader. He'd brought Fortnum and Mason chocolate with him, of course. So anyway, we went on there, went to the first presentation the next day, and we started our presentations. And of course, we'd split it up so that we gave a couple of paragraphs and waited for the translation. And everything was timed very nicely. So first person started talking, they did their first couple of sentences, and then the translation started and went on and went on and went on. We thought, what's going on? And the time of the presentations was taking about 3 times longer than we'd planned. So we thought, oh, this is ridiculous. So that evening, we were invited to a banquet. When we got back from the banquet at 10 o'clock, we all rewrote our carefully rehearsed presentation in about 2 hours that we'd taken about 4 months to write previously. So much for being everything prepared by GKN. So from there, we flew to Peking, our next destination, and we were going to an exhibition where we not only had a stand there, but we were doing further presentations. It was the rainy season in Peking, and at one lunchtime, we were taken back from the presentation or from the exhibition back to the hotel for lunch, because I always had quite a long lunch there. So we had lunch, and the rains were absolutely torrential. And at the end of lunch, they said, the whole hotel is packed, the car parks are packed. We're not going to be able to get the coach out very soon. We're going to be delayed getting back. And I said, oh, that's a bit of a problem, because I'm doing the first presentation going back. And one of the things that I did in preparation for the visit to China, did a lot of checking, a lot of reading. And one of the things I found is that the British ambassador in Peking, for his official car, had taken over a London taxi. So I was waiting in the office, and I looked out, and what did I see across the way but a London taxi? And just getting into the London taxi was Roger with somebody else who I had no idea who it was. Right, I thought, that's it. So I ran across in the rain, jumped in the taxi and said, exhibition, please. Well, I don't know who was most surprised, Roger or the British ambassador, but they said, okay, we'll take you. So I got a lift into the exhibition. In Beijing, I'd mentioned every day was a working day bar one, and this was where we had the 1 day off. And the previous day, our host said to us, fine, well, tomorrow is your non-working day, so we're going to collect you at 7:30 from the hotel and show you a few sights of China. Oh, great, we thought. So what they'd arranged is that we were going to visit the Great Wall, one of the 13 Ming tombs, and the Summer Palace. And even the following morning, just before we flew out, they were going to take us to the Imperial Palace. So a very, very hectic time, but wouldn't have missed it. It was absolutely fantastic. And this is where I can go into the pictures, because it's the only time when I was able to have any pictures. Hang on. I need to get into sharing. Okay, so that's the party of us. Strange enough, there's one person on the right there that I don't remember being there, and I think he was there for a couple of days. That's just to prove that I was there. That's the massive square in front of the Imperial Palace, which you've probably seen on television. I know what you're all saying. Oh, look, he hasn't changed a bit since then, over 40 years. You may notice that behind there's just one coach and a car. If you went now, that road would be absolutely packed with vehicles. That's one of the hotels we stayed at, and I'll put that picture in because I thought you might be interested in the quality of the cars they have there. They're quite outstanding, the cars. When I went back some years later, I was quite surprised to find that all of the vehicles were Audi A6s, which was quite a change from that. The organisation from the Chinese government was absolutely fantastic, and everywhere we went, we were treated like more or less like royalty, but a very VIP package, and we were welcomed everywhere we went, and they had everything planned perfectly. So this is the visit to the Great Wall. Now, I found it very surprising because when you leave Beijing and go out towards the Great Wall, the ground's fairly flat and level, and you go on for many miles on level ground, and then it's almost as though there's a rift in the ground, because suddenly there are hills and it goes up, a very hilly area. And a couple of miles inside there, you come across the Great Wall. And I thought, well, why didn't they move them a couple of miles away and build it on the level? But I guess not. The Great Wall actually was initially a series of many Great Walls. They were built between 403 and 221 BC by a whole host of small areas, small compartments, cutting off their areas from their neighbours. When China went into unification in 221 BC, then the next 15 years were spent joining up all the Great Wall and to make one massive Great Wall. And it was built by 300,000 political prisoners, many of which actually died on the Great Wall. Originally, there was 32,000 miles of Great Wall built in total. Today, there's a mere 3,750 miles left. It says, if you read it, that at the bottom, the Great Wall is 21 foot wide. At the top, it's 18 foot wide, and it's 21 foot high. And you're supposed to be able to ride 6 horses side by side. Well, maybe you could in certain areas, but certainly not in this little bit of an area, which was very steep. The steps there, but there are also parts of the area that are just slopes, and they've got a rope alongside the wall to pull yourself up, because it's difficult to walk up without the ropes. That's just a view of the Great Wall extending into the distance. And that's part of the tourist part of the Great Wall. Again, you can see it's got quite a slope on it. If you look the other way from where that was, there's quite a bit of work needs to be done on building the rest of the Great Wall, which they were working on at the time. When we went to the Imperial Palace, that's an amazing place. The palace is surrounded by a wall 35 foot high all the way around, so it's a very secure area. It's got 9,000 rooms in it, and it was completed in 1420. And most of those rooms, or most of the ones I looked in, I didn't look in all 9,000, but most of them I looked in were so finely decorated. And this is the sort of decoration you get in a lot of the rooms. It was absolutely a fantastic place. It's unbelievable to walk around there. This is a little bit of a family joke. In my early career, I was responsible for the light construction industry, and everywhere we went on holiday, if there was a dumper around, I used to take a picture of it. So that's just a picture I took of the dumper in China. Okay, going back. I trust we're back onto the normal screen now. Yeah. Okay, so from Beijing, then we took the flight out to Changchun. And one of the party who was in the pressings division, he was very keen on the visit to Changchun because he knew that they had got one of the largest presses in the world. There's a Weingarten Press. There were only two made. One was in Germany and the other was in China. So he was really keen to see it. So we took the trip out to the company, and it was an exceptionally impressive press, absolutely massive. It was sort of computer controlled in very, very early systems of computers, but it was in an air-conditioned room, or air-conditioned building is more than a room. And we were all very impressed, and we looked at it, and it was churning out components like no end. That night when we were discussing it, we thought, that seems to be building a lot of parts for what they need. And there were a couple of questions I wanted to ask. So the next morning they said to the host, can we nip back and have a look at the Weingarten Press? They were a bit reluctant, but in the end they actually agreed that we could go back and have a look. And when we got there, the room was totally empty, the press was still, all the windows were open, so forget the air conditioning, and the press was just lying idle. So how often it was used, we don't know. Incidentally, looking at some of the other press work in China, I don't think health and safety was very prevalent there, because we saw one press where there was a man sitting cross-legged on the bottom die, and as the top die came down, it was just a few inches above his head. He only had to stretch up, and he would have had a headache. So, no, not very good. Anyway, from there, we took a flight to Shanghai. On the one evening in Shanghai, Frank Manning from Hong Kong said to me, he said, I fancy just going out to having a quiet dinner tonight. Shall you and I just go and have a dinner? I said, yeah, that's fine. He said, well, I know a good restaurant in Shanghai. I said, well, we'll go there. So we walked from the hotel, we walked around all sorts of back streets. And in the end, he said, I'm getting a bit lost. Anyway, we saw someone sitting in the gutter. Now, I know a lot of people were dressing very similar there, but I'd have said he wasn't very lucky, this guy in the gutter. But Frank went over and started speaking to him, and the guy sort of pointed. And I thought, if he knows where this restaurant is, I'm not so certain it's a good idea. Anyway, we got to the restaurant and we had an excellent meal. And I said to Frank, how would that guy sit in the gutter know about this restaurant? he said, we didn't. I asked him where the railway station was because I knew the restaurant was next to the railway station. So that was pretty good. In the hotel in Shanghai, they had, we found they had a sports hall. So the two guys from contractors and myself decided after dinner one night, we could go and have a look at the sports hall. That's where it was. They said, you know what, you go out the side entrance to the hotel, just across the road, you'll see another sports hall. We went to the sports hall, and apart from the three of us and two Chinese people, it was totally empty. But they had a 9-pin Skittles alley, and we thought, great. So we spent the evening playing Skittles. The two Chinese people, one was there to see to our needs as far as the bar was concerned, making sure we are well lubricated during the evening. And the other poor chap, his sole purpose was to keep picking up the Skittles every time we knocked them down, which we did frequently. Anyway, getting late, we decided that was it, time to go back. So we headed out of the room and back. And the two great steel gates to the hotel opposite were firmly closed and locked. Now, Stefan, one of the guys, he was well over 6 foot, he started panicking. We're locked out, he said, we're locked out. And he took a running leap at the gates, started trying to scramble up it, and didn't manage to get very far. And we looked at each other and said, I think you'll find if we move around the corner and go in the front entrance, we might get in. Well, we needn't have bothered because two security guards suddenly appeared and gave us a nice escort round to the front entrance, so we got in safely. Also in Shanghai, part of the preparation, I'd read that there was a group of jazz enthusiasts who, from the pre-Mao era, obviously during Mao, jazz was totally banned. They weren't permitted to do any of their music. But they had the past year or so, and they were playing in some club. And I like jazz, so I thought I'll go around, I'll go to the club. These guys, that will be so from there anyway, we flew to Wuhan. I can't remember anything of significance that happened in Wuhan, to be honest. So from Wuhan, we took the overnight train to Xi'an. Now, we knew when we got on the train that we would be having dinner on the train, and we were all a little bit hesitant about, well, what's the food on the train going to be like? Anyway, we decided it must be dinner time. It's we've got to eat. So we all wandered down to the dining car. We could see people inside there eating. So we got to the door, and someone came up and said, "No." I thought, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "Yeah." He pointed to where his watch would have been. He didn't have a watch. He pointed to it, said 10. So, oh, okay. So we'll come back in 10 minutes. So we went back to our cabins. 10 minutes later, we wandered back down. When we got there, the dining car was empty. All the tables had been thoroughly scrubbed. The place had been cleaned spotlessly. We sat down and had an absolutely excellent meal. So that's the sort of treatment we were getting out there. Absolutely fantastic. Xi'an was, up until a year or two before we went there, a military area, and it was totally banned for anyone to go, foreigners or Chinese come to that. It was a sealed off area, basically. So when we got there, there are no hotels at all. We were put up at a company guest house, which I must say was a very nice company guest house. And we went down for dinner on the first evening, and when they brought the food out, they brought out this very large bowl of chips. Well, having been eating Chinese food for 3 weeks by then, we all said, chips. So as soon as they disappeared from the room, everyone dived into this big bowl of chips. Only they were stone cold. They had obviously seen what chips were. They'd probably cooked them the day before, put them in the fridge, and that was it. Not very good. Anyway, one evening we used to gather in people's rooms in the evening to discuss things, play cards and so on and so forth. And we were sitting in the room one evening and we heard a lot of talking and chattering outside. And we looked out and there were crowds of people, loads of people, all carrying little fold-up chairs walking past, going up the hill outside the hotel. And one of the parts said, "I've read about this." He said, "It's the Moon Festival. Come on, let's join in." So he and one of the others both had the shoes on. They raced outside and joined the crowd. And another couple of us, we got ready and we thought we'd go out and join them. So we went out and joined the tail end of the crowd. But it soon became apparent they weren't going up the hill. Well, they were going up the hill, but they weren't carrying on. They were going off in different directions. They weren't going somewhere. They were coming home. They're going home. They'd actually been to an open-air cinema that night, and they were off on the way home. We didn't see the other two till the next morning, and they told us they got to the top of the hill for the Moon Festival, but there's no one else there. So they came back. The other event, one lunchtime, we had a stroll around now. There's an article I've got which says that it was 2 years after we went from somebody who travelled there, and they said, when you go around China, that time, everybody said that you were. Well, yeah, but it was to be expected. So lunchtime, we were walking around the town, having a look around, and we walked down one road, and the buildings were sort of getting sparser. And there's a bend in the road. And I said, "Oh, I came down here last night." I said, "It doesn't go anywhere around the corner." So we stopped, turned around, and started walking back. We got part way up the road. And you know, when you're walking along, you may have that feeling that you're being followed. And we thought, "I'm sure we're being followed." Anyway, we stopped, we looked around, and there's a whole string of school children silently, absolutely silently following us up the road. Where we'd stopped was the school gates and they'd spotted us. And when we looked around, they all just burst out laughing. And we thought, oh, well, join in. So they carried on following us. And we thought, this is getting a bit embarrassing. We came to a market in the town. So, right, we'll pop into the market and go out a back entrance and go back to the hotel. So we went in the market. They didn't follow us in. We thought, that's great. There wasn't a back entrance. They knew this. So they were all waiting for us, and we got back out the front again. We got back to the hotel, and there were still a few hardy ones there, but they all had fun anyway. I mentioned earlier on we were carrying about 50 plus bags, cases, and we got rather expert at whenever we got to an airport or a station, half the party would go off to get a whole group of trolleys while the others wait. Out of the whole time, we only mislaid one piece of baggage. And of course, that was mine. My personal baggage disappeared, but only for a day. So anyway, that's a series of events that happened in our visit through Hong Kong, through China. We got to the end of it, we flew back. Our flight was due to arrive into Gatwick. We got as far as the outskirts of Gatwick, and the pilot came on the plane. The pilot came on and said, "I'm sorry, there's fog at Gatwick. We're being diverted to Stansted." So we landed at Stansted, and then we had to wait another 4 hours sitting on our cases, waiting for the cars that had been arranged to realise we weren't going to go near Gatwick and pick us up at Stansted. I've been back to China quite a few times since then, but never has it been quite an experience as that first one. it was fascinating. So that's the end of the first one. Next time I'll be talking about some of the travel experiences, flights, trains and automobiles, and some of the experience I've had with that. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you at the next presentation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. That was great. I'd like to open the floor to any questions. So if you've got any questions for John, if you'd either like to raise your hand, the function through Teams, and then I'll say your name and you can unmute yourself, or if you want to type it into the chat box, I'll pick that up as well. So we've got Neil, who's got a question.
Right, here we go. Right, well, John, thanks very much for that. I must admit, you disappeared off the Birmingham Automobile Division Committee, and I was told, oh, you've changed jobs at GKN, and I didn't see you for about probably 10 years.
That's why.
Of course, I also travelled in China, but I started my journeys there around about 10 years after you. My first trip was 1990. And I wonder whether you went back around about that time and what things you saw. For instance, 1989, you mentioned the square in front of the Forbidden City. And of course, that was the famous Tiananmen Square with the tanks. Yeah. And whether you saw anything positive or negative as a result of, that protest and the either crackdown or the opening up that came up afterwards. Because you mentioned Wuhan, for example, and of course, pretty soon after that, it started building the cars for Citroën, didn't it? Peugeot Citroën.
Yeah. I think when I went in 1980, they were exceptionally optimistic. You know, it was only 3 years after now. They felt a freedom, and I think having been sort of tied down for so long and then getting this freedom, that they just felt they could do anything and they wanted to go there. All the visits I made after, and yes, I was there in about the late 80s, early 90s, I was back again. But none of the times after that did I see the sort of optimism I think they had at that stage. It had died down a little bit. But when I last went, which was probably about 2005, something about that, it's just a vastly different place. You know, the buildings are just like any other major city now. All the smog problems are the same. So it's got more like anywhere else in the world. It wasn't as different as it was that first time.
Yeah. Like you asked me, the times I went, 1989 to when I finished going, which was about 1997, it was quite dramatic. And the thing I noticed in 89 was who was the party chairman after Mao, but basically he said, he came up with this expression, socialism with Chinese characteristics, which basically everybody interpreted as it was a license to go and make money. You didn't have to be communist with everything, and that was a period of optimism. But then I noticed that basically there was too much lending by the banks, that money that on projects that weren't actually viable. And around about 1992, it was like a boom and bust, shut down, and all sorts of things that we'd been talking to people about suddenly just disappeared. There was no money for them, and it felt like it was getting really westernised with boom and bust then. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, we never managed to do massive business in China. So
because you've got several plants out there, haven't you? Are they all axles, or are they a combination of axles and drive shafts, or what?
There's no axle plants that I know of out there. We never got an axle plant out there. But I left GKN in 97, so I've no idea what they're doing now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then we've got Jean-Luc. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, hello. Well, thanks a lot Thanks very much, John. It's always interesting to hear about other people's experience. I'm more interested in the expat side of that experience. So I've got a few questions. How long did you actually stay in China in total?
That first visit was exactly 4 weeks. We went on a Saturday, came back on a Saturday 4 weeks later. But I've been back half a dozen times or more since then. But that's normally no more than a few days.
Oh, so it was only short trips. It wasn't like a complete expat experience.
Oh, no.
Okay. So yeah, so that actually clears out my other questions. So when you went to China, did you actually stay with other European people, or did you actually integrate or try to integrate with Chinese people?
Oh, well, the party used to split up, and because we went to different plants, so all the meetings were with the Chinese people. But obviously in the evening, so we more or less stayed as a small party.
Okay. Well, still interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. So I don't see any further hands up. Has anyone got a question they'd like to come off mute and ask John? Oh yeah, we've got one.
It's me, Lewis. It's Matt.
Oh, is it you? Oh, no, there's someone else as well.
It is. Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to jump the queue, but I think if I can ask my question, it's just that John, you did mention the fact that you saw this chap next to a huge press with not that much regard for health and safety, and I know things have moved on tremendously since the time that you were there. But did you share your thoughts with the people around health and safety when you were there, or was that not the done thing at that time?
Oh no, we were free to give advice, and that was certainly pointed out.
Okay, fair enough.
No, we were invited to be very open at that stage. No holds barred. We could give. In fact, they wanted us to go in and comment on all their shortcomings, their failings, where they could improve. That's what they were looking for. So we were very open, and anything we saw like that, we'd mention. And mainly it was technical improvements that we were commenting on, but we did pick up on that one.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And we've got another one, Adnan.
Hi, John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is not related to your talk, but actually I have received an email from you. It was someone pretended to be you last week. So I just wanted to remind in case you're not aware of, so please do check your security.
Yeah. I'm very aware of it, thank you. I've had my account frozen from Wednesday to Sunday, so I've had a lot of problems. Okay. And I apologise to anyone who's had the email.
Okay, I know we've got another question from Alan.
Good evening, John. Going back to, I think it was Matt was talking about health and safety and things. Now, my time in China came significantly later than yours. I was there in 2017-18 on a number of trips. And the attitude that you were talking to health and safety, regarding health and safety when you were there years ago, is exactly the same that I saw back then in my recent trips, so 20 years on. The question really then is, did you feel that when you were talking with your Chinese counterparts that they were actually listening and taking on board, or were they just nodding politely? Because unfortunately, when I was there, I don't think they took on board much of what I said. And I wasn't there for anything to do with axles. It was drilling equipment, and we had visits to this, what they call it, they've got this, oh, my mind has gone completely blank, forgive me. major project to put rail and road across China and across the sort of the world. I visited a number of the tunnelling works, which were really quite shocking, and the manufacturing facilities that I was in and out. Health and safety was, I would say, 20 or 30 years behind where we are here now.
Did they take any notice? I'll never know.
Right.
Yes, as you know, for China and most of the Far East, they will always smile, nod politely,
Yes.
but do they take it on board? I don't know. No idea. I never went back to that factory to see that press, so I can't comment on that. So.
Right. Well, I'm unlikely to go back to where I was either, because they decided only to pay 2/3 of their bill, so they're on the, once they pay the last third, I will maybe visit them again, but until such time they're off the list. But interestingly, your story about the children following you, where I was in Weifang in Shandong province. And I'm slightly bigger than your average bear in terms of width and height, and not so much height, but width, and certainly I had a much fuller beard then, and I found that children were still absolutely astounded to see me, and they would sort of run round a corner, stop dead, and look horrified and not know what to do, because there was this larger person with a beard and whatever coming down the street. It was quite an interesting experience, I have to say. And I think the point of interest that I've taken it from my point of view is 30, 40 years on from when you were there, some of my experiences were similar.
But didn't you find that they were also polite?
They were incredibly polite. A bit like my children, they can be incredibly polite and then ignore me completely.
Yes.
Yeah, no, they were incredibly polite, but very, very frustrating at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see if they ever go forward with what we were discussing with them, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Is there any further questions? Don't see any more hands. Doesn't look like it. We've got no messages.
Lewis, shall I just would you like me to just close out then?
That'd be perfect. Yeah.
On behalf of the Birmingham Area Committee, I'd really like to pass on my thanks to John. That is episode 1. There are plenty more to come. So this is a brilliant opportunity to hear from a hugely experienced engineer about his times and his travels within the industry. And it does just go to show that you can get some absolutely fantastic experiences in your life, you know, that can be gained through a career in engineering. So absolutely brilliant, and I thank you, John, and look forward to the next one. Thank you very much.
December, isn't it, Matt? Sometime.
I believe it is, yes. The date will be advertised on the Near You website. Lewis is the man of all things accurate. I certainly can't remember that, and I've not got it written in front of me, which to you, John, would not be a surprise, I know. So very poor advertising on my behalf, but it's a teaser. Go on the Near You website, have a look. Lewis will have put it on there by the time you get to do it, I'm sure. Lewis is looking at me thinking, oh, great. Here's another thing. We might not have done, but yeah, let's look forward to that. It'll lead us into Christmas, and before you know it, will be mince pies and mulled wine and another episode from John Butler. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Really do appreciate your attendance and look forward to seeing you on the next one. So it's good night from me.
Well, thank you everyone. Thank you, John.
Bye.
Thanks very much, guys.